Hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining who's joining online, and thank you so much for joining who's joining in person. Um, I want to give you guys a few minutes just to relax, and we'll start our presentation shortly. So thank you for coming in, and I'll sit with you just in a minute. Right. Awesome. Yep. You can see the title of my presentation. It's the ethics of artificial intelligence. This is for my the ethical analysis class with Dr. Dale, and my name is Sufyan Aldugum. So this is going to be a really interesting topic that I've been thinking about for some time now, and I really think it's very important to be thinking about this specific topic at this point of time. So. Let's go ahead and start by looking at the speaker myself. My name is Sufyan Al-Dugum, and I'm a software engineer at Microsoft, and I'm currently taking a few graduate courses at Stanford, one of which is the ethical analysis, and that's where this presentation comes very important. So I wanted to also share a few of my comments that I think will kind of summarize the topic of this presentation. Every developer or even any human that uses machinery that includes artificial intelligence have a moral um, obligation to consider when designing those intelligent systems that better serve our humanity and our society. So let's go ahead and look at the outline for today. We will be discussing the following topics. We'll talk about the machine rights. We'll also look at risk and threats to human dignity, transparency and accountability, the danger of weaponizing artificial intelligence. We're going to look at the code ethics. We're going to look at some of the unknown impacts that we might not think about. And I also like to list a few of the ethics groups and top researchers and organization, and then we'll also look at our future potential for this topic that we have on hand today. I also wanted to mention is that the first probably 30% of this presentation will focus on the scientific or more of the technology itself. I wanted to do that to kind of explain to other students and people joining in what is artificial intelligence, just rough idea what it is, and what we're focusing on here, just in case you guys are not familiar with that. And then of course we're going to jump on our core topic of this presentation, which is thinking about the ethics aspects of it. So to start with, machine rights, this might be a kind of a new concept. Some people might think of it as a strange concept, but I'm sure if you're in the software world, you actually had thought about this a lot, given that some of the complex systems you do see develop on a daily basis. So if we look at the robot rights, those are the machine rights. It's just a concept that people should have a moral obligation, like I said, towards those machines, just similar like to the ones that we have, for human rights or animal rights. It's just, for example, it's the right to exist, perform its own mission, which mainly would be to serve humans. And then when you link those human rights to our duties before society, you have the right to, life, liberty, freedom of thought, and expression, and equality before the law. When we apply those to the machines, of course, we're talking about, the existence of that code, making sure that codes are equal. For example, if it's not really based on big corporations or big organizations giving those more rights or leeways, if you will, compared with maybe smaller companies or individuals. So we want to make sure we build a framework that treats everybody the same, no matter who is that source who developed that code. If you look at the risks and threats for human dignity, this is a very interesting concept that I wanted to include in this presentation. For example, if you look at Joseph in 1976, he didn't think that we should use technology or AI to replace specific positions that we have in our society. For example, like a soldier or a judge or a police officer. He brings a good argument, but I think the counter argument makes a little bit more sense. So if we look at the argument, he's saying that those machines lack the feeling of empathy that we have in soldiers, in judges and police officers. And another point he makes is that artificial intelligence, if we think that artificial intelligence can replace those major roles in our society, that means we're kind of degrading ourselves, or we're expressing atrophy to the human spirit that comes from thinking of ourselves as computer. If you look at the counter argument, we have Pamela, who's a big woman advocate, and I quote, she's saying that I'd rather take my chances with an impartial computer, because of course she's referring to the bias and treatments for generally for that the women faces and minorities face in this country. And then we have the AI finder John McCarthy, who objects to that tone that Joseph had, and thinks that when we ever build, or for example, if you look at the judge, what he's saying is that if we build that the judgment that you make as a judge based on specific facts and rules, you don't have a lot of room for that authority to abuse the system or abuse those rules. So he's saying, if we make a computer smart enough and have specific rules that they follow, we can count on a computer to make more unbiased decisions compared with a normal human judge that might have experiences in the past, or culture, or religion that can shape their ways of thinking and their judgment. And then to counter argue the other argument that about the artificial intelligence is kind of degrading ourselves, what Bill is saying is that we need to be a little bit more we just need to have humility, in thinking of, and just try to starve and look for better solutions that can help the human race in general, and not just focus on our dignity and being ignorant. So those are the arguments I thought were very interesting to look at in this presentation. Now, I want to share a few short charts here. Like I said, the first small part of this presentation is just to show you a little bit more understanding, give you a little bit of understanding what artificial intelligence is and what's the market for it now. And you can see here it's anticipated to be close to 36 billion in 2025. So it's a huge industry that is coming up, and that of course increased the need to build those ethical frameworks that can guide us throughout the future. If we look at transparency and accountability, I wanted to mention, of course, that AI developers specifically, they're the ones kind of representing our future humanity, if you think about it. And those are the main ones that have an ethical obligation to make sure all of our efforts are transparent to people that might not be in our industry, but we need to show them how that we're actually taking into consideration all of those ethical scenarios and dilemmas that we need to think about when we develop those systems. A few mentions that I wanted to mention is the OpenAI, which is a non-profit created by Elon Musk, and that's of course an open source AI, which the main purpose for it is to benefit humanity in general. Then I wanted to mention a recent case here at Microsoft, actually, that we had recently, where Microsoft kind of went into a dilemma of thinking, should we give access, universal access, to our face recognition software, which of course is based on AI. Oh, and they wanted to kind of reach out to the government, say what is the ethical decision making process that we should follow when we try to do the right thing in this case. We should, of course, count on the government regulations to make sure that we ensure transparency and accountability, and of course making sure everybody follows the same rule. But some other people might start argue that if we kind of add a lot of regulations, we get into that slow rate of innovation and progress. So it's kind of two-way street that we need to think about. A few other, of course, organizations and countries are working on the strategy for regulating AI and finding appropriate legal frameworks. This is another chart that I want to quickly mention on the danger of weaponizing artificial intelligence. We roughly, those are rough estimates that we have close to, 25% of our military combat software-based systems are actually depending on AI currently. And then, we have 6% of our research in that area is intensive research in that anonymous power, where the machines have to make the decisions, have to make their evaluations, and of course, those are 6% of our research. And now if we look at the main idea of this slide was that 60% of that, of the people or researchers or experts in that community are afraid of, to be honest, is losing control. So when I say losing control, I'm talking about the machines themselves. They're, super intelligent, they're super fast to learn, and we're kind of worried that they would lose control in terms of, making decisions. We won't be able to manage or comprehend enough to kind of prevent harm from happening. This gets me to the core concept of this presentation, which is looking at the code and software ethics aspects of it. I wanted to play a small video here for you guys that I thought is kind of interesting, and then I'll continue my concepts, because I wanted to kind of separate it into what is artificial intelligence, what is the capabilities, what we looked at what we looked at in that area, and then we look at the ethical aspects of it. So I hope you like this video.
I think one of the things that people mistake about technology is they imagine that there's something sinister about technology itself. There's a worry with any kind of automation called the paradox of automation. The paradox is this: the more you rely on a machine or a device or someone else to do your work for you, the less you do it yourself. And by doing less, you become less expert, you weaken, your capacities atrophy. One of the questions that really interests us is whether, in the process of interacting with machines, with AI, we form a kind of a loop of feedback. Can that make us better? Does it offer us a chance at getting better? Hi, I'm Pranav Das. I'm a professor of physics at Elon University, and I'm the principal advisor for the Templeton World Charity Foundation's Diverse Intelligences Initiative. It's certainly the case if you outsource a particular activity, you don't do that activity, and maybe you get less expert at it. But it's also possible that if you're careful and you've offloaded a task, that creates a space in your own life, in your own thinking, in your own emotional world, to focus on something else. So, for example, if you've given a machine the capacity to do something mundane, small, you let your mind then focus on the more important, on the more profound aspect of the problem. Maybe you then build a capacity you didn't have time to build before. Maybe you exercise muscles. Maybe you exercise your brain. Maybe you exercise your feelings in ways you wouldn't have if you had been constantly occupied by doing the little work. Our job is really to identify people and researchers, research teams who are exposing new ways in which machines could help our moral development. Could a machine, for example, hang out with you and just provide you feedback, remind you to be attentive, remind you to be your best self? That's a way in which, over the course of time, you might no longer need a reminder. You might have been focused. You might have found your way in the direction you were already going. So imagine then AI being a microscope. AI has the capacity to explore spaces of information much, much larger than we can take in. It can wait. It's much more patient than humans. So like a microscope, or like many of our tools, what AI can certainly do is give human minds, human ethical capacities, human spiritual capacities, more information upon which to base good decisions.
Yeah, just back to our main concept here. I wanted to get into this main topic that talks about machine morality. So it's a field of researching, that it's concerned with designing artificial moral agents or robots to artificially intelligent, computers that behave morally, or as through moral. Just to make sure, when we start giving those machines the decisions to make, those, that have major impacts on societies, on humanity, on disease, on combat, and so many different areas, we want to make sure, we develop those artificial agents with that moral kind of compass that they need to follow. So that's the main idea of machine learning. Now, three main parts of it. Of course, we want to look at who's responsible for that effort. A panel in the United Kingdom in 2010 looked at this, and they thought it's the responsibility of the developers, or the manufacturers, or the company that actually owns this software or this tool or this agent or robot. And then, of course, the concern that we have here is that there was a study in Switzerland that actually had a few robots, programmed to cooperate and elaborate and work with each other, on many different tasks that benefit the humans. But then eventually, when we introduced, artificial intelligence to them, we noticed that giving these capabilities, and they started learning, they started adapting, they started advancing, what they started to do is actually lie to each other, in an attempt to steal that specific resource, or to get more benefits, so we do kind of see that trend in machines when they start adapting. I do know another case of like chat robots that started using offensive language, or etc. So we need to be very careful with our models that we build, or where those machines start learning. And then I wanted to mention a few promising technologies. There's a case of neuromorphic chips, and those are actually aimed to process information similar to us humans, and it's nonlinear and with millions of interconnected artificial neurons. So it's a very promising technology that actually can think like us if we program it to do so. And then another honorable mention here that I wanted to say is that in the Moral Machines Teaching Robots Right from Wrong, Wendell Welch and Colin Ellens wrote in there where they concluded that the attempt to teach those robots the right from wrong will likely advance our own understanding of ethics. It's going to motivate us to close those small gaps that we might have in our ethical code, and it kind of provides that platform where we can do experiments to make sure we cover those small dilemmas. And so I'm pretty sure it can, that software can also help us address those issues. Jumping to some of the unknown impacts, of course, like I mentioned, earlier, one of that impact that we think is known, but in reality can cause many different issues, which is the power. Super intelligent AI can actually do a lot of different things to achieve its goal, and can do also a lot of different things to prevent others from, or any other scenarios from, achieving its goals. So we introduced this dilemma, is that with all that powers comes responsibility, where we do need this specific power, for example, to treat different diseases, help poverty, environmental issues, etc. But we also don't want them to use that same power of compute to do harm to others. And then the last impact that I really wanted to bring into light here is that a lot of times we have programs that follow specific rules. Even if we gave it a flawless ethical theory, they can follow that specific rule, to the letter. But what happens is that you would still end up in that is not in an ethical framework that is not common sense. So, for example, even if you follow that specific rule, that does not mean you're always doing the right thing, because we do a lot of things, humans, differently than a specific machinery. So that's kind of interesting to mention, is that even though sometimes you follow the rules, you will end up in many different potential harmful scenarios. So here, just wanted to also mention a few ethics groups. For example, the big tech companies are working established on a non-profit partnership, just to kind of formulate that best practice on artificial intelligence and just advance the public understanding of what it's all about. And then of course the IEEE put together that global initiative on ethics, and then you have the European Commission and a few other ones. Even the United States here, they put a roadmap for AI policy. Just a quick idea here on the future potential. We're actually, just the whole idea of this, not just presentation, just this area of research, is that we want to explore a scenario where a civilization, accidentally create AI through a rapid increase of computational power. So now when this thing happens, you have two different types of people. One would actually support it. They think, this is going to help us advance in so many different areas, even our ethical areas and moral understanding of society and our world. But then you have other people who are thinking, they'll always think about machines as, AI as machines. They're just disposable. They're not really useful, and other outside of their specific, purpose. But this kind of brings a little bit more of a complex, this complexity of relationships between machines and creators. It kind of brings that whole aspects of how we deal with machines, how they deal with us, how we design them in a way of taking consideration all of our human values and societal frameworks. Just a few, of course, top researchers here. We have, I wanted to list a few researchers that I've used, their work, of course, and some of the major organizations on AI, and then we have some of the references that I used for this presentation. And my last note is that I wanted to mention that this presentation will also, I'm going to be doing it again to a live audience in Living Word Church in Lubbock, Texas. And so if any of you have any questions or want to see it again, or think of future question after that, please try to join us again, and we'll go over everything. I hope you like the topic, and the whole summary of when we give a lot of power to machines, we have to think about their moral framework that they're using, just to make sure our society is advancing, but in the same time we're keeping our values and we're not doing any harm to others. So thank you for joining, and I hope to see you again.